Afternoon. How wonderful to see so many people able to be together again for the celebration of a life. My name is Merryl Blair. I'm the minister here at Hartwell Church of Christ, and it's my privilege to welcome you here on behalf of Bev's family as we celebrate and give thanks for the life of Beverley June Hancock. That's the last time I'm going to call her Beverley. No one will know who I'm talking about, our wonderful Bev. And to share our grief at her passing. We're also welcoming those who can't be here present in person, but who are very much here in our minds and hearts and in the wonders of the virtual world, especially to Lara, Ben, Simon and Phoebe, who are up at 3 a.m. in London to be present with us. Thank you so much for being able to make that kind of sacrifice to be with us. And I know Jamie really appreciates feeling you with him at the moment. But there are many other relatives, cousins scattered around Australia who are able to be present because of the wonders of the virtual world, and also the residents of the last living area of Bev. This church was very much Bev's home for a number of years. Over the last few days, I've been hearing some memories. I'm not going to say who fell off the toilet seat, I'm not going to say who did a few other things around the place, but it was a place where the kids grew up, where Bev and Eric had so much to do with the life of the church, particularly the music of the church, and we'll hear some more of that later on. I had the joy of singing with them on the odd occasion myself back when I came here about 30 years ago, and they're very much part of my life during the time that I have spent at this church. Now, it is the joy of this church to be able to offer all of you a space that is a sanctuary, a space that allows the tears that need to be shed, but also to let the laughter come out as stories are shared, memories are brought up, and all of those wonderful things that make family life and friendship so very vital and real are brought into this wonderful mix. Because both tears and laughter do honour to our memories of Bev. For all of you here, as friends and family, inevitably the finality of Bev's passing has left gaps. She is the only mother you've had. She's the only Bev that we've all had. There are things that we can never do again. There are words and things that perhaps would have liked to have been done that weren't done and can't now be done. You, her family, will miss her in all of her ways that she's been with you. Mum, Grandma, Granny Dynamite. Who puts their hand up for Granny Dynamite? Yeah, I love that. As soon as I heard it, I thought, yeah, that's Bev. Aunt, sister-in-law, so many things that she was to you all. And so here we hold you particularly. But for all of us, Bev changed our life by being part of it, as people do change each other, and how fortunate we all were to have known her. But I do want to say in particular to Jen and Lee, to Libby and George, to Alison and Paul, to Jordan, Ash, Phoebe, to James, Lara, Ben, Simon and Phoebe. Did I say Phoebe? Olivia. I knew. I just got the wrong name. Olivia here, Phoebe over in London. Our special love, not just now, but in the days to come, as you work around the gap, the Bev-shaped gap in your life. And it is life that's brought us together this afternoon, not just death, because we've all shared in a life and we're privileged to have been able to do that. We affirm that all human life is so precious and valuable and beautiful. We see the potential for truth and integrity and hopefulness present in every life that was so much bubbling out of the wicked little laugh that Bev had, the things that she would do that were so thoughtful, that would just come out of nowhere. Even in the last weeks, that lovely smile as she looked at something happening on the ceiling of her room, that was beautiful. We don't know what it was, but it was something she was seeing that was giving her a lot of joy. And even the tricky and difficult bits of a life make that life full and rich. The gifts and graces that Bev offered, and which we're going to hear about in stories, will never be lost to us. None of us understands the full truth behind what happens beyond death. But within the Christian tradition, we believe that as we journey from life into death, we are safe in the hands of an all-loving, infinitely gracious God. We believe that death invites us into total awareness. The God who stands with us at that moment is the same God who was prepared to die for love of all humanity. A God who has entered into every struggle and walks beside us so that we are never alone, even in the darkest night. And so with life in mind, we're going to hear and remember different facets of Bev as we hear her life recounted. Some of those things will no doubt surprise us. I think it's one of the great things about a funeral is when you think, I never knew that, when you hear something that somebody says, and we realise that as well as we know someone, there's another little facet that was known to somebody else but not us. But all of the stories we hear and all the stories that you'll continue telling as time goes on are the things that we give thanks for, the richness of a life fully lived with its own achievements and losses, its griefs and its joys. Let's pray. Our loving God, in the face of death, we come to celebrate the life of Bev and try to encompass something of what she means to us. We open our hearts to you, offering all of our feelings, loss and sadness, relief at her release from incapacity, our questions of meaning and belief in the face of the mystery and inevitability of death, the confusion of feelings with the happy memories and also sometimes harder and more difficult emotions, and the sadness of this thing called grief. God of grace and peace, revealed to us totally as love in Jesus Christ, you invite us to continue living into a future where you can be a source of strength and hope. We stand in a community of solidarity with one another today and hold in our prayers, not only now, but also in the days to come, Bev's beloved family. Amen. Well, a Hancock funeral, there's going to be hymns. There's going to be singing, and for Bev and Eric, they loved their singing, they loved their hymns, and so we have some wonderful hymns. We're going to stand now and sing and let it ring to the rafters. Great is thy faithfulness.
Oh
One of Bev's favourite texts from the Bible was Psalm 139. I read it with her last week, so let me share it with you now. O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from far away. You search out my path and my lying down, and are acquainted with all my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, O Lord, you know it completely. Where can I go from your spirit, or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and settle at the farthest limits of the sea, even there your hand will lead me, and your right hand shall hold me fast. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me and the light around me become night, even the darkness is not dark to you. The night is as bright as the day, for darkness is as light to you. For it was you who formed me in my inmost parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my thoughts. See if there is any wicked way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. 139 speaks of the all-encompassing love of God, from the heights of joy to the depths of despair, in light, in darkness, always present, always knowing, all loving, all accepting. Our all-loving Father in a heaven that is around and within and between us. And the words that we've just heard are so dear to Bev and to Eric. So seen through the lens of that love, no life is anything but ultimately important. And as we hear now the story of Bev's life, hopefully we can also hear affirmation of our own lives. Bev's grandson Jordan is going to share a reading with us, and then the family is going to recount Bev's life in memories. Thanks, Jordan.
That person is a success, who has lived well, loved often, and loved much, who has gained the respect of intelligent adults and the love of children, who has filled her niche and accomplished her task, who has never lacked appreciation for Earth's beauty or failed to express it, who leaves the world better than she found it, who looked for the best in others and gave the best she knew. I'd like to invite my brother Ashley and Sister Olivia up to talk a little bit more about our grandma. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for coming. I'm Ash, and I stand here alongside my brother Jordan and Sister Olivia as loving grandchildren of Beverley. Bev, or as Merryl's pointed out, we prefer to call her Granny Dynamite, had three other grandchildren to James, Ben, Simon and Phoebe, who are watching the live stream over in London at the moment. And they've asked me to read this piece on their behalf. Although we lived far apart and we weren't able to see her very often, Grandma had a definite impact on us and those around us. Grandma was a very light-hearted and kind person who was always ready to tell a funny story or two about family. Her playful, silly humour really made her special. For instance, once when we were all sitting down to watch a film, she suddenly appeared around the door wearing a mop on her head as a sort of wig, and proceeded to watch the entire film as if it was to be completely expected. As well as this, Grandma has also left her mark on the London motoring world. Now, whenever an aggressive driver is driving behind us and trying to take us over, we slow right down to annoy them. This is known as doing a bevy, as apparently this was a tactic she used to employ herself. Our dad always says it with a very mischievous smile. And in fact, Grandma's smiliness is one of the things we will always remember most about her. She was charismatic, sweet, loving, and utterly hilarious. The best grandma anyone could have. So thank you, Ben, Simon, and Phoebe. Just a little piece of my own. While I didn't share these experiences with Ben, Simon, and Phoebe, I too think of Grandma in the same way. The first word that comes to mind when I think of Granny Dynamite is fun. This is because she would let us do all the things that our mother, Ben's daughter, Alice, wouldn't let us do. She gave me my first coffee at the age of 4. Would take me to Red Rooster for some of her favourite crumbed prawns, while she was meant to be taking care of me as I was home from school sick. And she would let us stay up until Mum and Dad got home from a night out, where she would quickly rush to bed and tell us to pretend to be fast asleep. It's lovely to hear how Grandma treated Ben, Simon and Phoebe with the same fun, loving nature that she gave us, and in fact to all of us, because it's who she was, and it's what made her such a beautiful person. I think I actually summarised just about everything I would have said. Yes, we did used to stay up until early. She would let us stay up and we'd be playing hide and seek, and Grandma would assign herself the task
of hiding us would be like in a closet on top, she covers in a towel, and then put us there. And then it got to a point where it got a bit easy, we were sort of working it out. And she ended up putting us to live in a suitcase at one point. Anyway, it was, and she was having as much fun, if not more fun than we were. And that was the most beautiful thing about Grandma. You could just feel how much she loved us, and we returned that to her. We all loved it at bits. I've got one story, I'll try and tell it my best. We used to have a caravan in block, and this is a little bit going back to what Ben, Simon and Phoebe said about doing a bevy. So we're driving home, I had a couple of friends in the car, we're driving home, middle of nowhere, Gippsland, 2-lane road, and some guys come up and start tailgating Grandma. Anyway, I would have been about 12 probably. Anyway, she's tailgating and she purposely started going slow. Anyway, so she's decided, no, I'm just going to keep going slow. Guy's overtaken her, and then I've overtaken her and stood off in the distance, and I've said, Grandma, get him. And she didn't even, it wasn't even a yes, it was just, it was like she was just waiting for my, me to confirm to get him. And anyway, she just went, right, push the car button on the bell, turbo on the bell, and just sped off. Anyway, this guy was 400 metres in front of us at this point. Anyway, we're gradually catching him. I reckon over the course of about 10 minutes, I eventually caught him and Grandma starts tailgating him. And then we've overtaken him. And there's me in the front seat. I remember Grandma driving and we're just waving. And that was her. She was just heaps of fun and the most beautiful, amazing Grandma to all of us kids. So I love you, Grandma.
Alright, so firstly, on behalf of Jordan, Ashley and I and Phoebe, Ben and Simon in London, we want to say thank you all for coming today. So I have a toy puppy up here with me today, who I refer to as Lucky. Grandma got him for me when I was a baby, so I've decided to have him up here with me today, as he now holds an extra special place in my heart and makes it feel as though Grandma's up here with me. Standing up here today is nothing short of tough. It is with an extremely heavy heart that I have to say goodbye to you, Grandma. And I don't want to, but I know you'll be telling me that it's okay and that it's all going to be okay, because that's the type of Grandma you were. You were so kind-hearted, so selfless, and so beautiful. You always put others before yourself. You taught myself, Jordan and Ashley so many qualities that we will continue to use in our daily lives. I hope you know and realise the special place you have in my heart, how much I look up to you and how much you have shaped me into the woman I am today. Sitting in the room with Grandma on her final days was hard, but at the same time, it was also comforting as the room felt so warm and so full of love, just how Grandma would have wanted it. I felt as though Grandma was there with us in the room, rubbing our backs, hugging us, telling us it's going to be okay and that she'll always be with us, looking down on us. Now, I know many people don't believe in seeing signs of someone once they have passed, but on Monday, I was at the beach watching the sun go down, ocean to my left and the city to my right. Looking at the Eureka Tower, I noticed a white sparkle and was instantly mesmerised for two minutes. I could not take my eyes off of it. I felt a sense of warmth and comfort and came to the realisation that that was my Grandma, a sign from her telling me that she's okay and that she's made it to heaven. I know Grandma is up there, chatting away, catching up with Grandpa and all of her loved ones who she missed deeply, including giving Buffy, her dog, a big pat and a cuddle. As Grandma passed, I was in the room alone with her for 2 minutes and I made her a promise. Sorry. Grandma, you and my mum had such a beautiful bond. For the past 20 years, I've watched how much you two care for each other. Mum, you did such an amazing job with Grandma. The love you gave her is a love I've never seen anyone give. As I'm sure you know, and I'm sure Grandma would want me to tell you, she loves you so much, and although you may not feel it, she'll always be by your side. You two will always be the best of friends. Grandma, I promise you that you don't have to worry about Mum. I will always have her back. I will always show her love, spoil her, give her lots of love and cuddles, just as you did. And Grandma, although I know you'd laugh at me for saying this, the photo I've put in my car of us, I will always talk to. Tell you about everything happening in my life, as I know you'll be there in the passenger seat listening. On behalf of all of us grandkids, thank you so much for being the best. It is hard to put into words how amazing you were to all of us. This isn't goodbye, Grandma. We'll see you soon. I hope you sleep easy. Say hi to Grandpa for me. I love you. I always have and I always will. Thank you.
On behalf of Jen, James, Alison, I and our families, thank you for being with us this afternoon to celebrate our darling mum's life. Mum, Bev, was born in Hobart in 1932. Sadly, her young mother, Grace Loyler Hill, was unable to continue to care for Mum, so at age 14 months, a private adoption was arranged by our grandparents, Elvie and Jim Moses. Elvie, Jim and Mum then settled in Burnie. Mum's childhood was pretty strict. Elvie was a former school teacher. Elvie's 6 sisters, however, were known collectively as the Hurly-Burly-Furlies. Should Grandma arrive unexpectedly, the phrase, "Elves coming," would ring out. This provided the opportunity to clear any contraband that may be in the vicinity, for example, playing cards, cigarettes or alcohol. Pa was always Mum's refuge. Mum enjoyed school but was not too enamoured with school work. In second form, so year 8, Mum's French results were pretty concerning. Term 1, 35%, term 2, 17%, whereafter Pa must have said something quite miraculous, as in term 3, Mum achieved 92%. Years later, Mum would recall one particular phrase, combien des enfants avez-vous, which is, how many children do you have? A useful conversation started when in France, perhaps. From an early age, Mum learned the piano and sang beautifully. It was bittersweet for Mum to discover much later that Grace, her birth mother, had chosen to also live in Burnie, in 2 different houses, each within 1.5 k's of Mum, and that she was often in the audience when Mum performed at various Stedfords. Mum was taught piano by a nun named Sister Sabina, to whom Mum apparently made a comment about not being Catholic. Mum not being Catholic. Sister Sabina replied saying something cryptic like, "You don't know what you might have been," as apparently Sister Sabina knew that Mum's birth mother, Grace, was Roman Catholic. Sadly, the revelation of Mum's adoption was made in the cruelest way in the schoolyard by a thoughtless child. When Mum left school, she told us that she'd worked as a hostess for TAA. Disappointingly, much later we were told this was on the bus between Burnie and Wynyard. When Mum was 17, the family moved to Melbourne. This was possibly to discourage a budding romance. They lived in Denny Street, Brighton. Mum was very sad to leave Tassie, a place she loved, would defend to the hilt and return to any chance she could get. Elvie, Jim and Mum were regular attendees at St Leonard's Presbyterian Church. Mum worked at the Herald Reviewer and at Kraft Foods. Mum and Dad met through their mutual love of singing. A gentleman who happened to be Mum's tram commuter mate and Dad's tailor told each of them independently that there was someone that they should meet at the forthcoming Ballarat Stedford. The meeting went well. After Dad's nervous attempt to place his arm over Mum's shoulder on their 3rd date, Mum apparently said, "No, Eric, we are just ships that pass in the night." Well, so much for that. Mum and Dad married in 1956 at St Leonard's, and the following year Jen was born. I followed in 1958. In a not-so-subtle hint, Elvie gave Mum a copy of Modern Marriage and Birth Control, which may have done the job that Elvie intended, as there was little pause before James arrived on the scene in 1963. Alison was born in 1966. By 1965, Viers Road, Ashburton was home. This move meant that we were closer to Dad's family and Dad's former church, the Hartwell Church of Christ, where we are today. One vivid recollection I have of Mum is one Christmas morning, the phone rang and the caller was an elderly parishioner, Miss Pearl B, I'll say, from Collins Street Baptist, our previous church. Poor old Pearl, whose hygiene standards were questionable at the best of times, had terrible gastroenteritis. She asked Mum for help. Without hesitation, Mum went to her aid. Sadly, Elvy's grandma's responses were very direct and not complimentary. Mum had her priorities all wrong, she should be with her family, etc. So Christmas lunch was a little late that year, but we felt good about our mum. And fortunately, Elvy did mellow. In 1972, when Dad first became very ill, Mum was to really prove her mettle. Mum would soon be the breadwinner, working 3 jobs, childminding, dishwashing in a restaurant at night, and housekeeping for a very eccentric lady, while caring for 4 children under 15 and worrying about and visiting Dad. With help from Dad's family and Pa, she took over the reins of the family finances. It was a very stressful time, however Mum did it. Mum always had the mindset if things were difficult, you just had to steel yourself and continue, and she did. Things were very difficult for Mum for several years, and thinking back over this time as adults ourselves now, we wonder how we would have coped at 40 years of age. Mum's courage and selflessness meant that we always felt secure and loved. By the late 70s, our family life began to settle down. With Jen and I undergoing our nursing training at the Austin, life at Piers Road was not so busy. Sundays were usually Sunday school and church here at Hartwell. Mum and Dad would be over there singing in the choir or maybe here doing a solo. There might be a roast dinner with Grandma and Pa. Following the serenity of the morning, World Championship Wrestling or the roller derby would be on the telly. That is, if Mum was able to rest the TV from Dad watching the football replay. Speaking of footy, Dad would rue the day he encouraged Mum to go to football with him to watch the Mighty Hawks. Dad would slink away embarrassed as she barracked loudly. Curiously, only the opposition were ever the dirty players. Alternatively, we might go for a drive to visit display homes. Mum continued to sing. Jeff Hicks, our cousin, once remarked that Mum's voice could make you cry. Mum always worried about her performances, however, they were always perfection. Her piano playing would largely become a vent for frustration, though. We knew the louder she played, the more furious she was. We knew not to interrupt her until the pounding of the keyboard stopped. Mum was funny. To my horror, Mum decided that she'd meet Lara, James's future wife, for the first time at the airport wearing a black wig. She'd put on different voices when calling close family and friends on the phone. She took a ride in the sidecar of a Harley Davidson at age 70, inveigling the rider to take her from the school fete up to Box Hill North to show Dad. She loved Harley Davidsons. After finding a set of golf clubs in the boot of her car following a car service and realising the mechanic had used her car to go and play a game of golf, without any hesitation, she gifted the clubs to a person who shall remain nameless. I once surprised her by buying 2 tickets for us to a Michael Bolton concert. She liked him. As we drove into the car park at the Olympic Park venue, which used to be a greyhound track, Mum, still oblivious to our destination, exclaimed, "I like the dogs." Mum loved animals and nature and road trips. A notorious trip was one afternoon after my netball grand final. The 6 of us piled into the Valiant. The back seat was folded down, the area kitted out with a thick foam mattress. Mum and Dad drove through the night to Mum's parents who were holidaying in Beverley Heads. We arrived at 6 p.m. the following day. It was 30 hours of travel. Whoever was driving at the time suggested to one other at 4 in the morning they would like a pie. With that, "me too" was heard multiple times from the back. Mum was thrilled when Grandma and Pa gave them a caravan. Lakes Entrance was the initial destination of choice, however this was soon superseded by Inverloch. Many happy holidays were spent there. Around 2000, Mum and Dad left Ashburton for a smaller unit in Box Hill North. Unfortunately, the medication that Dad required during his illness led to kidney failure, for which he now required dialysis. The move meant that they were closer to Alison and Paul and their beloved grandchildren, Jordan, Ashley and Olivia, whom you have met. It has been alleged that at least one nefarious activity occurred at Box Hill Gardens Lake. Apparently, Mum would initiate trips to the lake with the main objective of feeding bread to the ducks. Despite the kids telling Grandma that the sign said, "Do not feed the ducks," Grandma would acknowledge this, disregard it, and then add, "Don't tell your mother." Fortunately, Mum and Dad were able to enjoy trips to London to attend James and Laura's wedding and honeymoon in Paris. Mum also really enjoyed a trip to Italy with her dear friend Dot Davis. Closer to home, she enjoyed holidays to various places. She holidayed on Magnetic Island with George and I and visited us in Sydney. She went to various places with Betty Goldsmith and took several trips to her beloved Tasmania. After our dear dad died in 2008, Alison recalls driving from Launceston to Hobart with Mum and hearing her utter the word beautiful 27 times. In 2012, Mum moved to Aveo Roseville in East Doncaster. This was the year Mum turned 80 and a surprise weekend trip to Tassie was arranged so that Mum could also celebrate with her Tasmanian relatives and friends. The London Hancocks were able to participate in the surprise by informing Mum about the weekend by Skype the night before we left. A big dinner was held on the Saturday evening in Hobart and Mum was thrilled to bits. The following year, Mum travelled to London once again, along with Alison, Ashley and Olivia, to spend time with James, Lara, Ben, Simon and Phoebe. Mum's formal Alzheimer's diagnosis following a stroke in 2014 was a devastating blow for all of us. It necessitated that Mum be admitted to a care facility. After extensive research, Jen and Alison decided on Warrandyte Gardens, formerly Graysdale, and this proved to be an excellent choice. Mum was the best knitter in class for several years there. However, she wasn't generally one to throw herself into the many activities. So one afternoon, thinking I was doing the fellow residents and Mum a favour, I put a CD of Mum singing onto the shared lounge CD player. Mum had sung for only a few seconds when one old guy yelled out, "Who put this rubbish on? Get it off!" So I did so very quickly. Fortunately, Mum did not pick up the slurs, so crisis averted. A positive benefit of the pandemic was that the three of us who no longer live in Melbourne could see Mum via regular Zooms. We are thankful to Warrandyte Gardens on many fronts, but their readiness to accommodate these weekly sessions was fantastic. The staff kept Mum safe during COVID-19, but more than that, her family were unable to be present physically. We feel very fortunate that Mum remained the same warm, loving, thoughtful and generous person to the end. We could talk to her about anything. She was always there for us. Our partners and friends loved her and she loved them. Mum was a support and friend to many. We've been inundated with messages about Mum, in particular her caring nature. If she saw an old lady in the street struggling with her groceries, she'd offer to drive them home. And occasionally there may be an extra place at Christmas for someone who would otherwise be on their own. Her vivacity and humour has also been remarked on. Everyone loved Mum. We are so relieved that her death, just like our dad's, was so peaceful. They both deserve this. This service has been created by people who love Mum, and we thank them most sincerely for this gift that they've given her. Merryl, Dorothy, Barb, Jane, David, Michael, and many others. So, Mama, please give our love to Dad and all the others, and special love and thanks to Grace.
So I'm Alison, Bev's youngest, in case nobody knew.
No need to rub it in place.
I won't tell you the age difference. Okay, so I'm saying words on behalf of James, my brother. Mum and Dad supported me as I pursued my singing studies, and in fact they flew over to London to be there cheering me on for my debut, for your first performance. Yeah. Mum accepted my wife Lara into the family with open arms and loved my 3 children completely. She held my sisters and I together on so many levels, especially when Dad was sick. And her devotion to her parents was above and beyond. She was a wonderful mother. I love you, Mum, and always will. Now I'm going to speak on behalf of Jen. promised. Okay. I was able to speak at Dad's funeral, which was another very sad event in our lives. But I've decided that I don't seem to be able to contemplate that for Mum's service. So Alison is speaking on my behalf. Well, it's happened. Our Mum is gone. She left us on Monday, and what's that expression? Gone but not forgotten, or ever likely to be, as she will always be in our hearts and memories. Memories that make me laugh or cry, but are all part of her rich life. Always thinking of others, usually before herself, and always very giving of both her time and expertise. But mostly her capacity to nurture and love me and all of my siblings in the true definition of a mother's love. Mum was a gentle soul with the heart of a lion, a knack for finding the funny side of situations and the ability to make you laugh. From a time when Mum and I were travelling late one night to Sydney and I was driving, we saw a lot of lights ahead and I thought it was a car accident, so I sped up a little. Well, it turned out to be roadworks. Unfortunately, the next flashing lights that appeared were a police car. Yes, I was pulled over. As the officer was explaining the speeding ticket I was receiving, suddenly Mum went forward from the passenger seat and said, "But officer, we were listening to John." His puzzled look as he ducked down to looking at Mum was classic. Mum then said, "You know, John Farnham." The officer responded with, "I don't think we can ask him to pay the fine." As we drove off, Mum said, "He was a lovely young man, wasn't he?" I didn't really have any response. There was a time when at a birthday dinner for me one year at Ashburton, Mum, Dad, Lynn, Alison and my long-time friends Karen and Rob were there. The card was always the most important part of the gift, according to Mum. Mum handed me the gift, but first I read the card. And as usual, it was a beautiful card, but she addressed it as, "To our first love, lots of love, Mum and Dad." As tradition dictated in our family, I handed it on so everyone could read it. Lib looked at the card and said, "Oh, first love." "Oh, I see, so I'm second." "Tup," that's my nickname, "you're fourth, and we'll have to let James know that he's third love." Our poor stuttering mother kept repeating, No, I love you all equally. I have no favourites." So that then led to this day of at times referring to each other as our designated number. Mum could see the joke in the end. She battled through whatever life threw at her and always, no matter what, loved all of us unconditionally. Love you, Mumsy. See you again. Okay. And this is now from me. She's the youngest. I wrote this down last Sunday night when I was at home and the words just kept coming. Okay. Here I am sitting on my couch with our dog Oscar by my side. I can see the sun setting outside my front window, so clear and calm. I saw Mum on Sunday morning. It was just the two of us for about half an hour. When I walked into the room, Mum was in bed with her eyes closed. I gave her a kiss on her forehead and said, "Hello, Mum." "Hello, Mama." Her eyes opened immediately and with a big wide smile, she looked back at me and said, "Hello, Mama." I will never forget that. With Mum and I fixed on each other, I told her how lucky I was to have her as my mum. and how much I dearly loved her. Always felt so safe and loved, always put everyone before herself. Our 3 wonderful children adored her, and I secretly think my husband Paul was her favourite. Mum was an amazing, strong, loyal, caring, selfless, funny, beautiful lady, gentle-natured, always there but never intrusive. So lucky that she was my mum. I will miss her greatly, but know she will always be by my side. I love you so much, Mum. So many fond memories, and we had so many laughs together. What an impression you have left on me. Bye-bye for now, lovey-dovey.
And from first, second and third love to fourth love, we thank you and Paul so much for caring for Mum in our absence.
Pleasure.
Someone left their glasses.
Oh, yes.
Well done, all of you. One of my memories of Bev, one of my many memories of Bev, is one of the times when she was singing in church here, and I was sitting up the back with Jane Powlett and Sheena Rhodes, and we were bawling our eyes out and passing tissues back and forwards as she sang "Be Still My Soul." And it was one of the most beautiful things I've ever heard. And afterwards we all went up and said, "You have to sing at our funerals." And she said, "I don't think so." We are going to sing "Be Still My Soul."
Your sorrow on your Be still my soul, and change and tears are past. All safe and blessed, we shall meet at last.
We're going to see Bev's life in pictures, and as we do, we're going to hear her sing. This is a recording of the Hartwell Church of Christ Choir. They were singing in 1972 at Christmas. It was a sacred cantata called Bethlehem. And the soloists on that day, there were probably some of you who were here, I would imagine. Visiting tenor, they had David Carter. Beverley was the soprano, Beverley Hancock, Bev. Eric was the bass, of course. It was conducted by Dorothy Willing, and the organist was Rex Cleland. Some wonderful names from the history of this church and the friendship circle of many of us. So let's see if we can get through this together. Well, to give us all a bit of a chance to recover, we're going to sing again. The hymn Morning Has Broken. It's not night time for Bev. Sorry. I should never have to get up to speak straight after something like that. It's just, doesn't work. It's not night time for Bev. The morning has broken for her. And I loved that story, Olivia, of the gleam of light that is with you, and you know is her and her love. So let us think of that gleam of light as we stand together and sing Morning Has Broken.
Morning has broken like the first morning. Blackbird has spoken like the first word. Praise for the singing, praise for the morning, praise for the springing, fresh from the word. Sweet the rains you pour, sunlit from heaven, like the first dew fall on the first grass. Praise for the sweetness of the wet garden, sprung from completeness where it becomes. Night is the sunlight, night is the morning, born of the one light, Eden's someday. Praise the elation, praise every morning, cause recreation of the new day.
Please be seated just momentarily. It's not the very few who shine on the world stage who make all the difference. It's those who live ordinary lives and who do it with grace and love. Bev made all the difference to some. She made a lot of difference to many. And to all of us, she left a spark of warmth and light and humour that made life better. The gentle ripples of her life and lives like hers help all of us live better. Live with more love, with more integrity, with greater connectedness. And so we thank Bev that she has taught all of us how to live better. Which doesn't mean that we're not going to cry at strange places or unexpected moments. It doesn't mean that we won't feel the deep aching loss, even bewildered emptiness from time to time. It's right that we should, because that hole can't be filled. The mum shape in our lives is the first we know. But it does mean that the depth of our grief is the sign of the height of our love. And as we remember Bev, she invites us into living more fully, with more fun, with a little bit of grace and dignity, but an awful lot of hilarity as well. And this we thank her for, and we pray that she will go lightly into this part of her journey. Eternal God, who holds our momentary lives within your eternity, we never get used to the ache of death, but neither we should. The pain we feel reminds us of how much this person matters and will continue to matter. The pain of loss reminds us that we can love deeply, live deeply, hurt deeply, heal and continue to live deeply. Bev's life may seem ordinary to anyone writing a history of our age, but it was extraordinary in the amount of love that she created and shared. And so we give thanks for her life. We give thanks for the power of the collection of ordinary moments to create a beautiful whole picture. As we lay Bev to rest in our hearts and minds, take our thoughts of her and let them be part of our living memorial to this wonderful woman and the life she shared among us. In the name of Christ, Amen. In a moment, I'll ask you to stand for the committal, but just beforehand, please join the family in the hall, just up the street and through the grill there for refreshments afterwards. Please stand. Part of our grief may be regret for things done or left undone, words said or not said. So we spend a moment allowing those regrets to pass through us and then to let them go. What we hold on to is the memory of a woman who has brightened the world by her presence in it. Know that for Bev, all things are now complete. Her love for you, full in life, is now complete in death. All hopes and dreams are fulfilled, and her story, which has been rich and full of love and laughter, has an ending. As we end the service in a moment, Bev will be accompanied out by her children to the singing of the words of Fore's Requiem in Paradisum, some of the words of which are, "May a chorus of angels lead you to paradise, rest in peace." And so we send Bev on. Bev, you have walked among us as flesh, blood, mind, heart and spirit. You have always sought to live a meaningful and fruitful life, establishing your ways as best you could in God's hope and peace. You have walked with courage and enduring love. We value everything you have been and everything you sought to be. For our part, we remember that we walk the pastures of earth but once, hoping to leave in the lives of others a worthy legacy and a fond affection. This you have achieved. May you rest in peace, Bev. And with Bev's time on earth now ended, we commit her spirit to the love and grace of God as we commend her body to the elements, earth to earth, ashes to ashes, dust to dust, in the sure and certain hope that she is at home in God who holds all life. And now to you who mourn, may the blessing of God be upon you, lighting the dark places of life. May the blessing of Christ be within you, companion, friend and healer. And may the blessing of the Holy Spirit be beside you, sustaining, carrying, lifting, comforting. Amen.